Hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine, and I drop in facts, information and observations and try to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about the chosen instalment is.
Hello there, Toby. This is Martin calling. Martin Holmes, the podcast guy. For this week's edition, I would very much like for you to watch all 4 episodes of The 10th Planet, which, as I'm sure everybody listening already knows, features William Hartnell's final regular appearance as the Doctor.
Well, welcome, and Jumpergate hasn't half taken a turn. Of course, this has given me sleepless nights. It's not, it's just suddenly occasionally made me think, hang on, I've seen a polo neck or two, haven't I? Because, of course, I think Barbara and Ian both wear polo necks, but does that count? Do they count as jumpers? And I'm not sure Barbara's are always jumpers. It might just be a top with a sort of neck thing. Because I think she wears something like that in Marco Polo. But here's a new thing. Is that the only story in which the title mirrors what somebody is wearing? I'm sure it doesn't. Yes, Marco Polo and Barbara's polo neck, the rings of Akka. I'm sure somebody's wearing a ring in the rings of Akka-10, but they're not those sorts of rings, are they? But anyway, yes, there are. Is there a story called the Hats of something? Listen, there are. Ian and Barbara both wear polo necks, and I had a quick look. There's a few. I think we can discount supporting actors, but a couple of guys in the warehouse in the War Machines have jumpers. I can't believe I'm going into this much detail. It's just I liked what Jason threw in, the idea that Dr. Barclay might be the first jumper in Doctor Who, but that seemed unlikely. And of course, so then you delve deep and go, oh, what about somebody in the background on the Empire State Building in the chase? Forgetting, of course, or discounting. And one tends to. I find this when writing obituaries. The mistakes tend to come when I've put a placeholder of something really general and then forgotten that that's a placeholder to sort it out, than when I delve into something that I'm really not sure about, so need to get absolutely right, and so dig and make sure I change, and so that's why often when you're reading something or reviewing something, you go, why have they made that obvious mistake? Because when you're checking something, your brain doesn't check the obvious as much as it checks the minutiae, bizarrely. So, yeah, why didn't I think of Ian and Barbara? I'd like to say maybe it's because a polo neck is something different. Because a couple of the sailors, I think, in the chase have polo necks as well. And for a sailor or a U-boat captain, it's it's work gear, isn't it? So does that count as a jumper? Maybe I'm allowing it not to count as a jumper because it's a polo neck, even though we used to call them polo neck jumpers. You don't really see a polo neck anymore. I think you have to have a flat tummy to wear a polo neck, which is not something I have, because I quite like a polo neck. You can do things with it, but I've never quite been the right shape to carry it off. But yes, there are polo necks sported by Ian and Barbara in the chase, possibly in Marco Polo, but I still they are different from what Dr. Barclay has. I would say he's the first V-neck. We have a V-neck in the same story as the Z-bomb. All we need is to see Ben's Y fronts, and for that somebody could do an X-ray, and then we've got X, Y, and I shall call it Z, but we'll probably get into that. So anyway, let's see what the comments are on. People are enjoying those feedbacking to me. Feedbacking, have I just created a verb to feedback? I'm not sure if I have. I'm happy about that situation. But anyway, who have we got? Jason Thompson. The instigator of Jumpergate. The Bernstein and Woodward of the jumper world. Jason says, I had a quick look back, and it does seem here we are. It does seem that David Doddermead is not the first jumper wearer in Who. William Russell wears a polo neck jumper in The Chase, but David Doddermead is definitely the first to wear a jumper as opposed to a cardigan, such as Ian wears in The Daleks, over a shirt and tie. So I'll claim that as a victory. And Guy Lambert says, fashion icon Ian Chesterton. Absolutely. And then Jason's back again. I love these Cybermen too. Yes, they're big and bulky, and so the scripted disguise fails utterly in the most ludicrous manner, but the cloth face and human hands are creepy. I think the redesign for World, Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls doesn't manage to recapture it at all, reducing the bulk and putting flesh-coloured gloves on them. In regard to the voices and weird opening mouths business, I think it works very well. and the next design has the flap on the mouth that opens. I recall Michael Kilgareth being interviewed and saying he used that as an argument that the principal Cybermen performers in the Moonbase and the Tomb of the Cybermen deserved higher pay as they had to learn the lines even if they weren't delivering them, so maybe that's why they did away with that in later designs. They should have kept it and spared us the weird rocking back and forth the Cybermen do in The Wheel in Space. Just a nitpick, Christopher Robbie in Revenge of the Cybermen was the first actor to be both in the costume and saying the lines, but it wasn't until Earthshock you had the transparent jaw showing the mouth behind it. Did I infer it wasn't? I jumped straight to David Banks because I was thinking about the jaw. Of course, I know Christopher Robbie does the voice in Revenge of the Cybermen because he decides to do it with an American accent, which is something I asked him about when I interviewed him for Who's Round, and it hadn't occurred to him that it was in any way a strange decision. And I love Christopher Robbie. He is he's a venerable and very well-spoken Shakespearean actor, so why he plays the cyber leader as if he's from the United States, I've no idea. Maybe maybe it's because he was thinking about the Z-bomb and it influenced the way that he would say and pronounce things. Jack Sharp says, the thought occurs that for BBC Balance we need characters named Dr. Natwest, Dr. Santander and Dr. Halifax. Aha, Dr. Barclay, for those not from the UK. Barclays is a famous bank, as are NatWest, Santander and Halifax. Dr. Co-op, Dr. Smile. I really love these Cybermen, says Jack. I understand why some people don't like them, but I also understand that those people are wrong. Oh, nicely put, Jack. Certainly, for all the criticism you can give their voices, you can at least understand what they're saying, which wasn't a guarantee with 60s monsters. I don't know what you mean, jungle. Toby, between the word orgasm last episode and you hooking up with Glenn Beck and talking about ejaculation in this episode, I'm concerned this is turning into a slightly dirty podcast. I did think twice about using the word ejaculation last time, but I meant it in its purest form and as you know a vocal release. I was purely vocal. It was a purely vocal ejaculation I was discussing. But yes, I understand that it also has a double meaning, which I'm sure I seem to remember lots of ejaculation going on in the novel of the Ark, and being amused on one hand and on the other hand going, no, but it means a sensible thing. And I had my sensible hat on when it was very sensible ejaculation that I was dispensing last episode. Blink twice if you're being held hostage by BBC Three, says Jack. The Cybermen names are interesting. I always forget about them because they're not actually in the episode, just the credits. Yes, indeed. He doesn't say, my name is Krang and this is Shav and Talon. I suppose it shows they're still a lot closer to human than later Cybermen are. Yes. Robbie Carnegie says, Cybermen always felt like my monsters. When I started watching Doctor Who, Daleks were a given, but when the Cybermen made their return against Tom Baker, I was fascinated. The first Target book I bought was Doctor Who and the Cybermen as a result. I think I found the look and sound of this era of Cybermen confusing at the time, but there's definitely something eerie about the stocking mask faces, open mouths and weird voices. The only surprise is how verbose they are. They may have eradicated unnecessary emotions, but not unnecessary words. That is really most unfortunate. Yeah, I love that line. Guy Lambert says, such an amazing episode. As important as the final part for properly introducing a key element of Doctor Who's future. This is Guy talking, of course, about the last edition of Happy Times and Places, which covered episode 2. I love how these Cybermen talk exactly how people with replaced body parts might do, with semi-human dialogue that reveals the humanity inside, just about clinging on before it's fully replaced in time for the Moonbase. They're even clinging on to names here. Reminds me of how Bill still talks like Bill in the opening scenes of The Doctor Falls because she's fighting conversion, but when the Doctor and others hear her actual words via her new Cyberman voice box, they're mangled and cold. It's all so great, says Guy in capital letters. Kevin West says, I'm enjoying hearing everyone's thoughts on this story. It's definitely not comfort viewing for me. I've always found it hard to love. It feels completely different to other stories from the Hartnell era. The Doctor seems to be barely involved, for one thing. I remember enjoying the novelisation a lot more than the episodes. Still, I'm re-watching along with this and finding new things to appreciate. Your candor does you credit, Kevin. And I can see why this might not be to the taste of people who enjoy the Hartnell era, because it is a bit more like what comes later. And, for those of us who celebrate how eclectic Doctor Who is, Doctor Who did stories of this quite frequently and quite samely for the next few years. They happen to be to my taste, but I understand those who crave a show that changes its landscape with every story rather than adheres to a formula. Adam Parkin says, it's interesting to hear your perspective, as I have loved it on my recent rewatch. He's responding to Kevin here, and ended up watching the whole thing in one go. My favourite part of episode 2 is Ben's reaction to shooting the Cyberman. You are right that Ben and Polly shine in this, and the Doctor fades away. This is a story, says David Gillespie Pratt, with not one but 4 brilliant cliffhangers. The end of episode 2 is great because it's dramatic but also economical. We can't show hundreds of spaceships, but we're in a tracking station, so dots on a screen makes perfect sense. David adds, Derek Martinez's direction is excellent in this story as well. With this and Michael Ferguson on the War Machines, it does feel like Doctor Who was undergoing a change in how it was presented. It's a shame we can't see a lot of the direction from other stories of this period. But anyway, how many other Cyberman stories can claim to have a shot between a pair of cyber legs? Indeed. Well, let us crack on and watch the 3rd instalment, the final existing instalment of the William Hartnell era, which, as we've established, doesn't actually have him in it. But let's see how that manifests itself as we press play on Part 3 of The 10th Planet in 3, 2, 1. It is oddly structured, this story, because I think all of the episodes are sort of distinct, and I think that's partially to do with the Cyberman involvement. In the episode 1 is the sort of build up, and that they arrive at the end. Episode 2 they arrive and lay out their plan, take over the base, but during that those invaders are overcome. So then episode 3, they're hardly in, and episode 4 we'll come to. So this is reshot. So Christopher Matthews gets the opening shot, which I'm pleased about, but his speech is a little bit short. But I do like what David said. Jerry Davis is spelt wrong there. So Kit Pedler is now being spelt wrong, but Jerry Davis is spelt incorrectly. I suspect, I think Bernard Lodge did the graphics, didn't he? So he might have been in trouble a couple of times over the course of the month. But I do like the playing the letters. So there we have Gordon Craig as not the famous. There was a architect, wasn't there? Gordon Craig. Not that. I wonder what happened to Gordon Craig. We did Albert Ward, who played the Doctor's hand in Celestial Toymaker. I know what happened to him, but I don't know anything about Gordon Craig. I think there's a documentary to be made about these people who played the Doctor. Chris Jeffries, the Troughton, who you see in the Dominators. But anyway, that's Gordon Craig collapsing and excusing the Doctor his role in this week's episode, which is a shame, as he was on such good form last week. But yes, I do like that economical cliffhanger from last week. David's right about how that works. And here we have an addition to the story now that General Cutler's son, Terry Cutler, played by Callan Angelo, who was another of those actors we didn't really trace, but I've discovered now he died a few years ago. Ben's wearing a jumper. Ben's wearing 2 jumpers. Hang on, you wait for a jumper to come. You wait to decide whether a polo neck or and a jumper count as the same thing. Ben has got a polo neck and a jumper, which suggests to me that maybe a polo neck isn't a jumper, because nobody wears 2 jumpers. But Ben's got a jumper over his polo neck. I mean, they are in the South Pole. Marco Polo has a polo neck. The story in the South Pole has a polo neck. There's a pattern here. But yes, I mean, Jason Thompson, what are we thinking? We're talking about David Doddermead's jumper and not Michael 2 Jumpers craze. But there we go. I never thought that when I was talking about one of the landmark Doctor Who stories of all time, I would be discussing the number and indeed demarcation of jumpers in the Hartnell era of Doctor Who. But there we go. That's the joy of being a very trivial person who loves a very trivial thing, which is, I do sometimes think when, the things that we find out that we get really, really excited about as a Doctor Who, most people don't even know who quite well-known actors are. And the fact that I might find out a fact about an actor that even Doctor Who fans don't know who they are does make me wonder if I've wasted my life. And I was looking at the BBC Doctor Who output and going, but these young people, they don't know anything about Doctor Who, on the Instagram or whatever, and sort of going, why do we need to see people who don't know as much about Doctor Who as Doctor Who historians know talk about Doctor Who? And then you click on and you go, oh well, it's because they're influencers with 500,000, 1 million followers, so of course they're going to be on it because they are of more interest to more people, because most people have a sort of general interest in something and don't need to go any further. So you pore over the minutiae and you pay the price. So here we have sweary Steve Plytas, effing Steve Plytas as he will be known from now on. He's also he's in Batman. He's the Doctor who tends to the Joker when he's been all damaged in the first Batman film. It's Jack Nicholson. So we've got 1 degree of separation from the 10th planet to Jack Nicholson. But there's some lovely close-ups here. I really do like Derek Martinez's camera work. This feels very sort of urgent and in your face. The very, very sort of these grizzled actors, clearly lived a life and probably served in very, certainly I would think in the Second World War. I mean, if these two in particular didn't, although I suspect they did, the Doctor Who cast lists in the 60s are full of people who, went through all sorts of experiences that none of us can even imagine. And that always gives this stuff a sort of feeling of authenticity. I think that, it's a different world from ours. He's very stroppy, isn't he, General Cutler? I mean, I do buy the thing that people criticise Base Under Sieges for the idea that they always seem to hire the least suitable people to be base commanders in important places of Doctor Who, but without that there wouldn't be the drama. And I have to say, I think Robson and Cutler and Jarvis Bennett are more interesting than Hobson in the Moon Base, who's just sort of quite jolly and affable, But here we have. So presumably Ben there is saying what the Doctor would have said about Mondas shrivelling up. But this brings us to one of the issues with the story, doesn't it? Is that actually if nobody did anything, Mondas would melt and the Cybermen would be defeated. The key flaw in the Cybermen's plan is that it's a rubbish plan, and that if everybody just waited, they'd be hoist by their own petard. And it's so you need, for this story to play out, you need Cutler there to put his son first and to be a bit of a to be a bit gung ho. I do like David Doddermead and the fact that Barclay is seen as somebody that they can work on, and I think he's about to snap at. Is he about to snap at Polly? I love the bit where he says to her, "I'm sorry, that was rude." I think that's really sweet. I think he does that in a bit. Oh, and of course, poor old Polly ends up making coffee a lot in Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis stories, which means that Clip shows delight in going, yes, look, this is all the women in old Doctor Who did. But and it is a fair point. But she also does a lot more than that. She's the Ben is stuck with the Doctor in the cell, and it's Polly that has to work her wiles on Dr. Barclay and persuade him to come over to their side, which is very handy. Whilst Ben, I think, is going to is going to crawl through the biggest ventilation shafts in jumpers, ventilation shafts. It's all stuff that I love. And all of this reminds me very much of my youth, people having penknives, and I lived out in the countryside, and my brothers were both sort of doers, and I don't know, you just don't see it so much anymore. Of we all got, I think we all got given Swiss Army knives once when my dad came to visit, and there was a bit for taking stones out of a horse's hoof that was particularly, I seem to recall, a particularly nasty bit. I cut my finger on it. But you wouldn't give anybody a knife these days, would you? But in those days, you could, you were sort of hands-on and practical. And our house was actually full of daggers and things that my dad had acquired over the years. Sort of military sort of collectibles. But yeah, we were quite sort of messy and hands-on, and we'd blow things up and set fire to things, which obviously people don't do anymore. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't hang around. But if I did see people, blowing things up and setting fire to things, I'd think they were delinquents. But we were just bored. But I did more. My brothers were much more practical than I. I did more of this sort of thing, of reading books. I remember reading the 10th Planet novel, and it felt so thrilling and exciting. And of course, I do quite like the sort of radiation gear that they've got on here, which is somewhat quaint, but it does the job, and at least it's not sort of bulky and horrible. But it does sort of look like General Cutler does look like he's about to dye somebody's hair or something. I don't know. But again, another sort of bit of level to the set here. I feel the base setup is very plausible, even though I do take the argument that why is the holding cell in the corner of the main control room, whatever. Here's Christopher Dunham as the RT operator. For ages, I got confused because there's a Christopher Denham in The Savages, but Christopher Dunham, who then became the principal of the Poor School, the drama school, where it's a great idea. My friend Francis McGee, who's now a very successful actor, he studied there, where people work, have a day job, and the drama school classes fit around that, so that the money that they earn goes to pay for their drama schooling. I'm sorry, that was rude. Yes. He's so nice. I think Annika said she liked David, and that I think he could put it away. I have a story about David Doddermead somewhere in a book of theatrical anecdotes, where I think the long and the short of it is he gets bitten on the old chap and it swells up. I don't quite know why that story is told in a theatre. I think he was filming somewhere abroad and sunbathing, and an insect bite swelled his there we go. Why would that be a story in a book of theatrical anecdotes? But it sure is. I might dig it out. I might see if I've still got it somewhere. Polly's pretty blunt there, isn't she? It might mean the end of Cutler's son, but he's got a real reasonableness about him, David Doddermead. He's the sort of person you'd want reading a Jackanory story, or doing a bit of Open University for you, or he's just sort of solid British, very BBC. I like him because Barclay is Australian in the book version. Again, that's Davis. So, I think Jerry Davis sometimes gets a bit of stick for being, doing the sort of pulpy sci-fi aspect of Doctor Who that makes it a bit more like other sort of sci-fi things, and particularly American sci-fi. But it does mean he brings with him some of the positive aspects of that, and it bestows. I always think Doctor Who, when it does stuff that other stuff does, it's weird because I love Doctor Who for being Doctor Who, but I also, when it does something that normal people really like, it sort of defers greatness. So if there's when everyone was into the X-Files, I'd always point out that there were Doctor Who stories that were a bit like the X-Files, and then when Doctor Who did bits that reminded me a bit of Buffy, I thought, well, people thought, but my sister thinks Buffy's great, so that's good, because it means people who might not like Doctor Who will suddenly like Doctor Who, and it's odd because you don't ever want Doctor Who to be derivative, but of course it soaks up influences from elsewhere. It inevitably has to. And so long as it puts the Doctor Who twist on it, which is that, it has this benign hero who's fun, who has a sense of humour. It has a a sort of questing morality about it, but without being being too preachy. I think. And that it's a format that can embrace any number of different sorts of storytelling, and just the fact that it's indefinable magic in it. But I mean, it's a shame that we lose Ben and Polly for this, but William Hartnell for this episode. But I do like Ben and Polly as companions. It's such a shame we have so little of them. But Hartnell's absence from this means that Barclay's handwriting's almost as bad as mine. But with his penknife Ben here. But I like the amount of action that Ben and Polly get in this. It's nice that we've got these 3 episodes to see them shine. It saddens me that in 2 stories' time Fraser Hines comes in and sort of messes it up for these 2. It's not Fraser's fault, but I've just said on another recent podcast, it would have been nice if maybe Jamie had come a little bit later, just to give us a proper outing for Ben and Polly, who get sidelined and then rather unceremoniously dumped, because I think they're great and they were a breath of fresh air when they joined in the War Machines. Here we are. It's that wonderful slow bit now, and the opening bit of this, because this obviously goes into dum to dum to dum space adventure, but the bit before this marching bit is played slowly. It's played at a different speed when the 10th planet arrives, so they really do mind this space adventure. Oh look, one of the Cybermen's lamps falls off when you've got that wide shot of them. But this is a brilliant sequence. I love this sequence, even though one of them actually legs it. But of course, later on, you want the Cybermen to be indestructible. But we've always accepted, haven't we? The Cybermen are indestructible, but their own guns kill them. It's like, hey guys, why don't you invent guns that kill everybody apart from you? David Gillespie Pratt has some excellent stuff about on his Twitter and YouTube about how these sets and how clever Ben in the ventilation shaft is, in order that Derek Martinez can shoot it in the way that he does. And it's that sort of attention to detail that makes me love David and mean that Doctor Who is always worth a revisit. So there's something about the levels and the accessibility of this set in order. I mean, I think you can see to the left hand side there. You can see a hole in the set there. Can you see a section is out, and that's in order that the camera can film Ben from there. But you wouldn't really know if you weren't looking for it. So the practicality of how you film it in order to see Ben both within the ventilation shaft and in it from the outside through the grill, which is all stuff that when you're shooting as live you have to kind of consider. I love that Cyberman sequence. It's all we see of the Cybermen this week, which is a bit of a shame, because they are the headline news about the story. So we really only have episode 2 to get to grips with the Cybermen in terms of what we can see. And I was going to talk a bit. Oh, yeah, and yes, that's right. I was going to get annoyed with somebody getting an actor thing wrong, as is my thing. Somebody once saw a list, the list of Cybermen extras in there, I think lists a John Salter, but it got mistyped somewhere as John Slater. And that was enough for some people to think that really well-known British actor John Slater, who had nothing better to do than come and be a Cyberman extra. Even if this guy had been called John Slater, I still wouldn't have thought it was the same guy as the Z-Cars guy, because it just doesn't make any sense. But some people just go, well, it says it there, and see, I'm giving them the voice in order to reduce their credibility. But sometimes if it doesn't seem likely, it's probably not. That baffles and infuriates me, and I still think there are still some places on the internet, maybe they've been expunged now, because I know David Brunt has done a lot of work in this area to point out that it's not the same guy, but I think there are still some places on the internet that say that famous Z-Cars actor John Slater just popped in to do a day's filming on Doctor Who to get over hot and sweaty in a Cyberman costume to do some extra work, which he wouldn't have done. This is an excellent stunt. I think is it Peter Pocock who's the stunt man who does that. And of course Michael Craze, didn't he? He hurt himself. He met his wife Edwina Werner on this show. Because I think he was recovering, wasn't he, from some nasal surgery or something, and she threw some snow in his face. But Edwina Werner, I only discovered this very recently, was married to the actor Anthony Werner, hence her Werner. Werner wasn't her maiden name; it was her married name. She later became Edwina Craze, and a very well-known production associate on all sorts of things, including EastEnders and This Life. And she met Michael Craze on Doctor Who when she was married to Anthony Werner, who'd also done icy things in Doctor Who. He'd played an ice soldier in The Keys of Marinus. But then Deborah Watling later had an affair with Anthony Werner. And I think that led to the end of... I think there's certainly some symmetry with Anthony and Edwina Werner both having relationships with Doctor Who people when they're in a relationship with somebody else or in Doctor Who. It's all in my biography of Anthony, about whom I didn't know, didn't even look up too much because he's only in one episode of The Keys of Marinus. But he gets a whole biography because he's had a very interesting career in my episode of Too Much Information on the Snows of Terror. But we're not on Marinus, we're on Earth in 1986. I enjoy this stuff of being in charge with being in touch with the spaceship up there. I mean, I think the General Cutler Sun thing is stretching it a little far, but the spaceship feels. You feel helpless about the spaceship. It's all the way up there, and you can't do anything about it. And we don't want to lose another one because that would make the story seem repetitive, if nothing else. But having lost one, I think that's sort of saying we really can't. And we have everybody's looking suitably sweaty. Loads and loads of close-ups here from Martinus, and the idea that Ben is concussed, because of course you can get concussed in sci-fi and not have to go to hospital and be fine the following week. Although that said, Shez has had 24 on as we've been going to sleep, and the amount of stuff that people go through just in a day, and 3 hours later is right as rain, having been killed pretty much 3 hours before, but because it's a couple of episodes later, we've kind of forgotten. Good show though. Anyway, so that we're about to do the last moving pictures of the Hartnell era. So I'm going to watch the animation, I think, next time, just because that's what's freely available to me. But I'll try to avoid talking about the cartoonish elements, although I think it shouldn't be too difficult. I do love a snowbound setting in Doctor Who, I have to say. I think it really suits the Cybermen as well, because they're impervious to cold. But I don't know, silver and cold, and the fact that they're metallic and they're emotionally cold. I just think it works. And I think it's such a brilliant visual. I love that. Them marching through the snow, and I think the South Pole setting is very well rendered. And it's an altogether solid production. I don't think Derek Martinez ever puts a foot wrong. And as David, I think, said in the comments, there's a youthful urgency. I think there's a sort of philosophical aspect about the early years of Doctor Who, and a slightly experimental one. And here we get the young directors. And Doctor Who at this time always had sort of young directors. Now the directors coming in want to do something punchier and gutsier, and Doctor Who needs to change as it does over the years, and I think punchy, gutsy Doctor Who is a subgenre of it that has its fans, and indeed the Hinchcliffe and Holmes era, which has muscularity, is a favourite amongst many, myself included. So although Doctor Who needs to be whimsical and charming, and it's not Sam Peckinpah, when it does bring this sort of grimier, sweatier, workplace realism to it, it helps to ground the science fiction. So it's just another approach to Doctor Who that makes it work, and that means that the show can do any type of story. This is so different from the Ark, and so different from the Web Planet, and so different from the Romans. If you think of all the stories that have gone before this, it's a bit similar to some that are coming after, but that's not its fault. And I think it's fascinating to view it in its place in Doctor Who's history. But also the fact that I think you do miss Hartnell in that episode. Actually, I think I was occasionally, trying to find things to say there. There's a lot of, because I think the story is kind of treading water a little bit there. I have to say, I still love it, but because it hasn't got the Doctor and it hasn't got the Cybermen, there's part of me that's thinking it's missing a key element too far. Much as I love Dr. Barclay, who's gentle and sweet and helpful and cooperative and very polite, and irrespective of the status of his jumper in the whole canon of Doctor Who, Two Jumpers Jackson and Polly, I think are great. So they can definitely shoulder the burden, but having had so much pleasure out of Hartnell giving such a good performance last week, I think it's a shame, especially knowing what we know in that next week's his last, and we don't have that. So I think my favourite thing about that episode, it's difficult, isn't it? I love the Cyber Massacre just because I love a Cyber Massacre. Cybermen are great for killing, aren't they? Even though, there's a couple of problems with that. Is one that the light falls off the head of one, and the fact that the two survivors just sort of run away, which is quite un-Cyberman-y. Yeah, I know there are those two in Attack of the Cybermen as well, but I think that's also quite chortlesome to view upon. But I love that setting. I love the sort of military base thing, being besieged, having to hold out. I think anything where people have to bravely hold out, to buy time just before it's too late, that to me is real sort of good, exciting, dramatic, dramery stuff, and works particularly well for Doctor Who. I love Dr. Barclay, I love Ben and Polly, but I think the thing I'm going to choose as my favourite of episode 3 of The Web Planet, I think I have to do a shout out to designer Peter Kindred, and it's partially inspired by David Gillespie Pratt's very good dissection of how the set design works on his YouTube and on his Twitter. But I mean, aside from that, the amount of levels that he puts into it, the fact that it all seems very solid and very real, and it's obviously really good to shoot in because you've got all that bustle. I think that control room is excellent, but it's also got so many different levels to it, and then you have the ventilation shafts, which yes are massive, but he's constructed them in a way that they can be shot very interestingly. And then even with that new set, there's a couple of levels there so that Ben can go over the edge, and that's a brilliant moment. I love that stunt. But then the bit that everybody climbs up so Dyson can look down at Cutler and Cutler can look up at him, and yeah, and I think the snowy setting is really nicely rendered as well. We don't see much of it this week, but it all adds to it. So I'm gonna choose Peter Kindred's design, and I love the fact that he's also the designer of Fury from the Deep, which was for many years my story that I would impress people by saying is my favourite. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing Peter, and he's a very nice man. So, what is Martin Holmes, lovely Martin Holmes, who's isn't his enthusiasm lovely? He's like, and I don't mean this as a pejorative, Martin. I am a dog lover, but he's a bit like a sort of cheerful puppy dog, which I love because it's so easy to be cynical. It's so easy to be, we can default so quickly to sort of taking the piss. But I actually find pure unabashed pleasure a more attractive quality than cynicism or over familiarity, because it to me it ties in with that childlike glee that Doctor Who gave us when we were kids, and I never want to lose sight of that, because as one gets ever older, losing sight of what it's like to be a child and the many marvellous things about children and childish imagination and childhood curiosity and all of those things being an adult's not all it's cracked up to be. We think we've got it sussed, but to us a wardrobe is just a wardrobe, and I think when a wardrobe can be so much more, I think the world's probably a bit more magical, and the world needs a bit of magic. So let's see in what form Martin says abracadabra right now on episode 3.
Episode 3 is an interesting episode as it starts with the collapse of the Not Doctor and allows other members of the cast to pick up his lines and become more proactive, and also helps feed into that notion of the Doctor being worn out, which might come in handy later on. Lots happens, of course, and it does escape many of the Part 3 traps, and despite another Polly coffee scene and a convenient ventilator shaft, I thought that the more proactive nature, especially Ben's proactive nature, but also of Polly and David Doddymead's pointily bearded Barclay in this, might be my favourite thing. But watching it again rather changed my mind, because I think the highlight of episode 3, for me, at least this time around, because you always find something new, is Dudley Jones as Dyson, because perhaps because of his build and manner of speaking, just reminds me a little bit of my dad, a tubby little Welshman. I mean, I know Dudley wasn't Welsh, but yeah, that's where my mind went. It reminded me of my dad.
Well, he was certainly of Welsh stock, Dudley Jones, but yes, well, he didn't remind me of my dad, so I didn't choose him. Although I do like the bit. There's a bit where he looks a bit sort of tired, doesn't he? And he does a sort of glum, a bit comically resigned. He is good, Dudley Jones. He's in a Dennis Potter as well. But he was. I think he was long dead before we started looking for anybody, wasn't he, Dudley Jones? Unlike some others. Or was he? I don't know. Let me think. But anyway, he's dead now, and was never interviewed. But then again, nor was David Doddymead. But I know a few more stories about David Doddymead, and I remember when David Doddymead died, because it was in Doctor Who magazine. But he's a sort of if he'd been in a missing story, I'd have probably written him a letter. But I wrote to people that were in missing stories because it somehow made me feel like I'd connected with something totally lost. And 10th Planet, well, partially, I mean, I thought it still existed. I thought it existed for a while. But anyway, let's not get into that. As Martin was talking there, I was thinking, why didn't I choose Ben and Polly being proactive? Because I think that's actually a better thing for this episode, and Peter Kindred's sets maybe should be something for the whole thing. But especially because I can't quite put the finger on why I like Dr. Barclay, apart from the fact he's just very nice. But nice is an awful word. Martin then described him as the pointy beard. Have you not noticed the jumper? The point of the V-neck, my friend, is the pointier thing. But obviously, Martin is not sufficiently genned up on the importance of jumpers in Doctor Who that he's looking at people's beards. I mean, let's not get into Doctor Who beards, although he does have an excellent beard and a genuine beard in a story in a program that often has fake ones. But let's not get into that right now. Dudley Jones as Dyson. Well, I would never have chosen, although I do like him, and I think he's rather fun, and he does the job. He doesn't do anything wrong, but he certainly wouldn't have been on my, if you'll excuse the pun, radar of things to choose about episode 3. And isn't that the joy of it, is that next time I watch it, I'll probably go, oh, Martin was really into Dyson in this episode, so let's hoover up everything we can of Dyson when I'm looking at this, and I will see brand new things in the instalment. It's I did think it trod water a little bit, but it was it was a matter of compromise. You've suddenly lost your leading man with only 4.5 days before you're back in front of the cameras again. So I still think it's a great instalment of Doctor Who. I think it's sweaty. I think it's dramatic. I think it's naturalistic, and there's plenty going on. It's a really solid and enjoyable production. I chose the sets. Martin chose Dyson. I don't know what you out there chose, but I think what it proves is that there's plenty to like about the 10th Planet, even though, as we've discovered this week with Ben's positing of the flaw in the cyber plan, it's story-wise there are problems, but it's just done with such flair is the wrong word, because it's not avant-garde. It's done with such solidity. It's done with such realism. It's just done with such commitment to being plausible and dramatic that I kind of don't care. And that's nice, isn't it? Why should I try and find reasons to not like something if actually the reasons for not liking it I kind of don't worry about, because I'm being distracted by everything about that and everything else. And that is, drama is always a bit of a conjuring trick, or it's the art of distraction. Drama and television are more dramatic and less realistic than real life, and that's why we seek our escape in them. And I'm a willing escapee, and so I'm very happy. I'm sad that I will not be seeing part 4 rendered with human beings, but rather sketches of them next time. So I salute the Hartnell era with its last live action episode available to us, and hope you've enjoyed it, and that you watched it in a place that was happy and at a time that was similarly joyful. And until next time, thanks very much for listening. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my guest, Martin Holmes, who you can find on Twitter at MAW_H. I'm grateful to Martin and to the patrons who make this podcast possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Stephen Moffat, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Chamberlain, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, El Pandras, Susie Ferguson, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Ashley Knight, Joe Llewellyn, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore, Rick Moran, Kevin Murdoch, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Cirillo, Frank Shales, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, and Paul Harris. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name mentioned on the credits, then go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock. It's one of the perks that cost as little as £3 per month. For that, and anything you'd like to pay on the higher tiers, but everything's available at the lowest one, you get advance releases, you get bonus material, you get pictures of my dog, you get about 3 things per week, you get exclusive AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, and a podcast all of your own called Far Too Much Information, as well as looks behind the scenes at the various Blu-ray and DVD extras that I make. And if you would like to support but don't want all that sort of monthly commitment shenanigans, you can go to Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock. It's another way of supporting independent artists who create their own content online. And it sounds like a terrible world to me as well, but it's the one we live in, and it's the area I seem to have ended up inhabiting, and this is as much as a surprise to me as it is to anybody else. But I'm grateful to everybody who has supported these, not just financially, but by doing the thing that you can do that costs you nothing, which is to go to iTunes, Apple, YouTube, anywhere that you consume these things, and to like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star reviews, and a few lines where you say nice things. It just all helps to make other people aware of what's going on. Thank you so much. Well, I'm all over the internet, aren't I? I'm on Twitter at Toby Haydock and at Haydock Podcasts. I'm now on Blue Sky as well. It's quite a long name, I think, but I'm the only person called Toby Haydock. You'll find me. Ditto, I have a Facebook page. I'm also on Instagram, and I have a YouTube channel where stuff gets uploaded now. These podcasts get uploaded. So if you could follow that and all of that, it just helps me do my thing online. So there we go. I should give Martin a proper plug next week for him. Well, in fact, I will. It's somebody has commented upon an aspect of Martin that well, I'm not sure. Yeah, should I should I release it? Because I'm very much a don't spoil a secret thing. But maybe it's a thing that's more widely known. I quite like the mystery, but I'm being ultra mysterious now, aren't I? Oh, Martin, it sounds like he's killed someone, or he's a terrible perv, and neither of those things is true. Open brackets, as far as I'm aware, close brackets. But it's just because somebody has just not that long ago commented on Patreon something about Martin's online activities. And if that hasn't intrigued you about tuning in next time, I'll probably forget though, because I don't have a plan. I just talk and hope for the best. Sometimes I really do tread water. Oh, you could tell. And then I stop recording and go, oh, but hang on, when I was thinking about this, I thought of all that interesting stuff, none of which I've said. Oh, well. Anyway, I'm going to go to bed now, which will involve taking my jumper off. Yeah, but what sort of jumper is it? Well, let's not go there again.